came up with nothing alarming. On the campaign trail, both presidential candidates are making their case to voters that they would be the better terror warrior.
I'm the only candidate in this race who's been part of the hard decisions to take terrorists off the battlefield. What I've laid out is a path forward that will keep us safer, protect our country, and go after the terrorists to finally destroy them.
In the 20th century, the United States defeated fascism, Nazism, and communism. Now we must defeat radical Islamic terrorism.
Joining us here with reaction in Washington, Sebastian Gorka, author of the best-selling book, Defeating Jihad, along with David Terr, a human rights attorney and former State Department official here in Washington. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Sebastian, first to you. Should the FBI have seen this guy?
Given his travel records, we now know he was visiting Quetta. Quetta is the hotbed of Salafi jihadism. The Quetta Shura is based there. The fact that we have reports that he made anti-American statements here and homophobic statements, I think an interview or two would have been very, very wise.
From everything we can tell, David, the FBI did not interview him back then. As Sebastian mentioned, he did travel overseas to Afghanistan and Pakistan. Obviously, they tracked this guy down very quickly, but there seemed to be red flags along the way.
Yeah, there's an amazing similarity between Rahami and the Orlando bomber Mateen. Both were disaffected Muslims. Both were homegrown terrorists. Both came on the radar screen for the FBI. The FBI investigated both, but apparently the FBI concluded after investigating both that they did not think either of them were a threat to the U.S. That's where the FBI made a mistake. The FBI can't get into the minds of these homegrown terrorists, but we would hope the FBI will change its procedures and look at threats like this more closely.
But is it because there's a sensitivity, like an eggshells tiptoeing around about this issue?
There are several possible explanations why balls are being dropped in terms of national security. One is simply a manpower issue. The director of the FBI himself has said there are 900 cases they're investigating linked to ISIS alone in every state of the union. That's a huge labor-intensive exercise. Secondly, we have seen that there are certain sensitivities, a certain political matrix being forced upon our operators or investigators, which isn't really often from the FBI. If you dig deeper in these cases where something was spotted and people are pushed back from the investigation, you saw this with Nidal Hassan, the Fort Hood shooter, the nexus of the political correctness that is pushed down is usually from the Department of Justice itself and from the Civil Rights Division. So it could be a case of somebody getting into the FBI's protocols and saying, no, we're not going to focus on this right now.
What about the political fallout here? This comes, we should point out that we believe that he came as a child at some point from Afghanistan, but it also comes in this back and forth about what to do about refugees. And it also comes a day after the Department of Homeland Security IG report that says some 858 people who were scheduled for deportation were actually given citizenship. Today we find out that number is really up to 1,800 individuals that the DHS gave, that the citizenship was given to 1,800 plus individuals. What about the political fallout here?
Well, there is some political fallout. Now, you have to look at refugees. None of these homegrown terrorists are actually refugees, as far as we know. And so they did not come here as a part of the refugee resettlement process. And in fact, no refugee so far has committed terrorism in the United States. Let's specifically look at the Syrian refugees, who are a hot-button political topic right now. No Syrian refugee who has been resettled in the United States has committed terrorism. That doesn't mean that the U.S. government hasn't made mistakes with respect to immigration. And you pointed out a very important one, which we've allowed over 1,000 people to go from a list where they were supposed to be deported to somehow a different list, and they reapplied under a different name and were mistakenly admitted. That is a significant error that needs to be corrected. Luckily, the U.S. government has identified it and hopefully is correcting it very quickly.
But it shows the weakness in the system, Sebastian. And it I guess, reiterates or kind of backs up some of the things that Donald Trump talks about on the trail.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just go to the chief law enforcement officer who's talked about this. Director Comey said, when you have people coming from a war zone like Syria that is not friendly to us, on the contrary, we're bombing them, there is no way to vet individuals from Syria because there's no database to vet them against. The Syrians aren't going to give us the data. So what's the other alternative? My parents were refugees. They escaped a dictatorship during the Cold War. There was no way to get information about who they were. So what happened? They spent weeks in a refugee camp undergoing counterintelligence interrogations to prove their bona fides. Again, incredibly labor-intensive protocols. Perhaps we don't have the capabilities.
But quickly, are you saying that you shouldn't be afraid of refugees coming in here in large numbers?
No. What I'm saying is we need to have a significant vetting process for refugees, and I'm glad Sebastian pointed out he's a refugee. Refugees have contributed a lot to this country. Donald Trump talked about how he defeated fascism in World War II. Part of the way we defeated it is we had refugees who contributed to the nuclear program that helped us get out of World War II. Refugees do contribute so much, and so far refugees have not been a source of terrorism. That doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to vet them significantly, but the refugee resettlement program has a significant vetting process. It takes 18 to 24 months to come here as a refugee. There are multiple interviews, there are background checks, and so far it has worked.
Politically, it seems like it's a hot-button issue in this election. Sebastian, David, thank you very much. Fair and balanced argument there. Directly ahead, President Obama takes some not-so-thinly veiled shots at Donald Trump during his UN address today. Republican vice presidential nominee Mike Pence joins us to respond. Stay tuned. In the Impact segment tonight, President Obama getting political during his final address to the United Nations General Assembly. The president used the occasion to take some not-so-subtle shots at Donald Trump.
Today, a nation ringed by walls would only imprison itself. But there appears to be a growing contest between authoritarianism and liberalism right now. And I want everybody to understand, I am not neutral in that contest. I believe in a liberal political order. It's no surprise that some argue the future favors the strong man, a top-down model, rather than strong democratic institutions.
Joining us now with reaction from Williamsburg, Virginia, Republican vice presidential nominee Mike Pence. Governor Pence, thanks for being here.
You bet, Brett.
Well, the president didn't say Donald Trump's name, but he clearly was talking about him there. Your reaction to that speech?
Well, the president's speech before the United Nations, again, not just being critical of Donald Trump, but again, criticizing people in this country that take a different view on a range of issues, particularly border security, on the foreign stage at the United Nations. It's pretty typical for this president. Throughout his presidency, he's been willing to be critical of the American people and on the foreign stage, and I think that's unfortunate. The quote that I prefer comes from Ronald Reagan, who said, "A nation without borders is not a nation." And even when Donald Trump visited Mexico City and sat down with President Peña Nieto, they both agreed on the sovereign right of every nation to maintain its borders and to have border security. And when Donald Trump talks about building a wall and reestablishing the southern border of this country strongly, enforcing our laws, reforming our immigration system, that's what he's talking about. And it's not about isolating the United States from the world. It's really about ensuring the security of this nation, and that we're a nation that can uphold our laws.
I heard you talk today about the investigation into Rahami in the New York, New Jersey bombings. Do you think the FBI dropped the ball there?
Well, it's really hard to know. I think we just have to follow the facts in this case. It was obviously we were all shocked this weekend when we heard word of bombs going off in New Jersey and New York. Leave aside the terrorist attack that took place in Minnesota. I give law enforcement a lot of credit for less than 24 hours apprehending Mr. Rahami, but to find out that his father had reported to the FBI several years ago that he thought his son was a terrorist, and his son was apparently not put on a terrorist watch list and not given more additional attention is really it's really frustrating.
Governor, you look at the polls around the country, and there are a lot of states that are very close, some within the margin of error. Right. You look at the Electoral College map, and you know this. Any expert you talk to says Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine have more paths to 270, the number of electoral votes needed to win. What is your strategy as a team, and where are you focused?
Well, we're just going to continue to draw a contrast in this campaign, Brett. 7.5 years of the leadership of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, which Hillary Clinton wants to continue at home and abroad, it has weakened America's place in the world and stifled America's economy. Donald Trump and I have a message to make America great again by rebuilding our military, restoring the arsenal of democracy, restoring relationships with our allies, hunting down and destroying those who inspire violence against our people or bring violence against our allies and against our nation. And here at home, instead of raising taxes as Hillary Clinton would have us do, Donald Trump and I will cut taxes, release American energy, repeal Obamacare. That contrast and that choice is what's drawing more and more people. A close race here in Virginia, according to the most recent polls. All over the country, we're seeing more and more Republicans, independents, and many Democrats rallying to our cause because they know we can be stronger, they know we can be more prosperous, and they know in this election that'll take electing Donald Trump as our next president.
Governor, I want to ask you quickly about something you said this weekend. Take a listen.
I frankly hold Dick Cheney in very high regard in his role as vice president and as an American
That's the
leader.
kind of vice president you'd want to be?
Well, I think a very active vice president. Vice President Cheney had experience in the Congress, as I do, and he was very active in working with members of the House and the Senate.
Yeah, that's what you said on ABC, Governor Pence. Vice President Cheney arguably was the strongest vice president in our history. Is that what you're looking to be?
No, you know, I was asked the question on the tarmac on the way out to a campaign event, and you know, I had the privilege of working with Vice President Cheney when I was in Republican leadership on Capitol Hill, and the analogy that I saw there, that frankly I see from our last 3 Republican vice presidents, is that I hope I'll be able to bring to our new president the experience that I've had, the relationships that I have on Capitol Hill to help turn this country around. I mean, Donald Trump's got a vision for America of rebuilding our military, restoring strength and reviving our economy through the same principles that Ronald Reagan advanced in the 1980s, President Kennedy advanced in the 1960s, having the constitutional conservatives appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States.
You know, Governor,
my hope is, like our last 3 vice presidents, that I'll be able to work closely with our new president and with leaders in Congress to take his vision and turn it into practical policy that he'll be able to sign and really make America great again.
You know that Mr. Trump has said some aggressive things about Vice President Cheney in the past, including on this show, about getting into the war in Iraq and about his role as in that administration.
Well, look, I hold Vice President Cheney as an American and for his service to this country in a variety of capacities in high regard. But I would just tell you, I think the last 3 Republican vice presidents, who I've had a privilege to know individually, have all served their presidents well. And my ambition, if I have this great privilege, Brett, is to take Donald Trump's vision to make America great again, and to call on those relationships that I have with members of Congress and, frankly, with governors around the country, translate that into the kind of policy that will really result in a stronger America at home and abroad.
And last thing, very quickly, former vice president who became president, George H.W. Bush, reportedly is not voting for your ticket. Your reaction?
Well, again, his service in uniform, his long service to this country, his service as our 41st president, I hold President Bush in the highest regard, and I respect his opinion, but I respectfully and strongly disagree. You know, I'll step out from here in this room and go out to a rally here in Williamsburg, Virginia, and stand in front of people who know we've got to make change in this country, who know we can make America great again, and Hillary Clinton, who's determined to continue the very policies that have weakened America on the world stage, have stifled America's economy, have walked away from the constitutional principles of the foundation of our judicial system, is just simply the wrong choice. So I'll respect the right of everyone in my party and everyone in this country to make their own choice. But for me and for more and more Americans every day, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, Donald Trump is the right choice. And when we make him president, we'll make America great again.
Governor Pence, we thank you for your time. We'll see you down the trail.
Thanks, Brett.
Coming up, Hillary Clinton bringing race back to the forefront of the campaign following the police shooting of an unarmed black man. And later, the first presidential debate less than a week away. How is Donald Trump gearing up for the big showdown? Trump campaign manager Kellyanne Conway enters the no spin zone. Coming up. In the personal story segment tonight, politicizing race in the presidential campaign. The issue returning to the forefront following the police shooting of an unarmed black man in Tulsa, Oklahoma on Friday night. The situation is under investigation, but Hillary Clinton is pouncing, writing on Twitter today, quote, "Another unarmed black man was shot in a police incident. This should be intolerable. We have so much work to do." Hashtag Terrence Crutcher H. Clinton also condemned the shooting during a radio interview today.
This is just unbearable. And it needs to be intolerable. And so, maybe I can, by speaking directly to white people, say, look, this is not who we are. We've got to do everything possible to improve policing, to go right at implicit bias. We can do better. We have got to rein in what is absolutely inexplicable.
Meanwhile, over the weekend, President Obama tried to drum up support for the Democratic Party among African Americans.
If I hear anybody saying their vote does not matter, that it doesn't matter who we elect, read up on your history. It matters. I will consider it a personal insult, an insult to my legacy, if this community lets down its guard and fails to activate itself in this election. You want to give me a good send-off? Go vote!
Joining us now from New York, Juan Williams, a Fox News political analyst and, of course, co-host of The Five. Juan, I tell you what, you hear the president there, and it seems like they are seeing some polls that there's not a lot of excitement in the African-American community, perhaps, for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I think there's some anxiety right now on the Democratic side, and largely, remember, race is central to this campaign. About 90% of Trump voters are white, about a third of Hillary Clinton supporters non-whites. And what you see right now is that with the polls tightening, there's a great deal of concern about whether or not the Latino vote and the black vote are sufficiently energized for Hillary Clinton, or whether, as you heard the president say, they're saying, oh, well, who knows what matters, and can Clinton match Obama's numbers in the Latino and black community?
She is clearly underperforming President Obama's numbers in both elections. But can President Obama, who's going to go out on the trail maybe 2 days a week starting next week, kind of transfer that to Hillary Clinton, that excitement?
Yeah, that's the big challenge, and he's going to be, I've written a column, I said, in some ways, with his high approval rating right now, we had one poll that had him up at 58, he may be her big October surprise because his numbers are so strong. But you've got to remember that on an issue like the Tulsa shooting, Hillary Clinton is out there trying to excite her base, Brett, because it's a legitimate issue. It's the #1 political issue right now in black America. And so when people talk about police shootings, police abuse, you think of you think of Black Lives Matter. This is something that really reaches out. At the convention, she had Mothers of the Movement. Trump, on the other hand, with the birther stuff, he's trying to excite the white base. So the politicization of this presidential election, no question about it.
Although he's also done some outreach to African-American communities in recent days as well. Juan, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next
Brett.
on the rundown, the stakes couldn't be higher for the first presidential debate. Can you believe it? We'll get an inside look at the preparations with Trump campaign manager Kellyanne Conway right after this. In the Campaign 2016 segment tonight, the first presidential debate. We are just 6 days away from that big event, and both campaigns are in their final sprints for preparation. The stakes obviously could not be higher, especially given the recent tightening in the polls. And the person getting a lot of credit for Donald Trump's gains is campaign manager Kellyanne Conway. Even the left is reluctantly giving her praise, such as during an interview she did with Bill Maher on Friday.
Now you're perhaps the most important person in the world because you seem to be the only person who's been able to tame Donald Trump. Many have tried, but only you were able to pull that sword out of the stone.
Joining us now from Trump campaign headquarters in New York, Kellyanne Conway. So what is it? You're pulling the sword from the stone, Kellyanne.
No, it's very nice of Bill Maher and you, Bret Baier, to say that. But let me repeat to you what I said to Bill Maher on his show, which is it's Donald Trump who deserves all of the credit. This is his campaign. This is his movement. He's the guy on the plane every day taking the case right to the people. And I walk into Trump Tower every day, and I know that this man was very successful a long time before I arrived. And I think that good leaders just need people around them who provide an environment to let them be themselves. And I'm so glad that so much of America can certainly see the tough-minded, strong leader, future President Donald Trump. And I'm so glad so many of them can also see the very generous, very funny, very empathetic Donald Trump out there on the stump. You saw him with Jimmy Fallon, Dr. Oz earlier in the week. You see him giving very tough-minded, very tough policy prescriptions just this week in Florida, yesterday, North Carolina, today, Bret, on national security, saying immigration security is national security, laying out specific plans. So we're really happy that the response that we get from the electorate. Frankly, we're very happy with these tightening polls. My counterpart, Democratic the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton, upped our chances of winning all the way to 40%, giving us some love yesterday.
Let me ask you about debate preps, because we are 6 days away, and we've heard a little bit from the candidate himself about this, but specifically what is happening. We see him on the trail. We see him at these events. He kind of jabbed Hillary Clinton on Twitter today for being off the trail and working on debate prep. What is he doing specifically?
He's doing many things. I mean, he prepares all of the time because he's a very brilliant businessman who's always taking in different pieces of information, weighing consequences and options. You saw him in the Commander-in-Chief Forum 2 weeks ago, Bret, where in all of the post-forum polling, he clearly won. According to NBC's own polling, other polls, independent polls said that he won that forum. And why? Well, because I think that his answers are very concise and confident. He gave answers to all the questions Matt Lauer asked him. He got 16 questions or 13 questions or so. Hillary Clinton received 7 because her answers are so lengthy, so lawyerly. We're not even sure if she's answered the question when she's done or what in the world she's apologizing for or explaining away. So I think the Commander-in-Chief Forum was a very good preview for what you're seeing. But okay. Mr. Trump takes the debate very seriously, and he's preparing in his own way, as are we all.
You know, he was on this show last night, and he told Bill that the moderators and the debate process is, quote, an unfair system. I mean, is he trying to work the refs here?
Well, we think that perhaps the refs are being worked after Matt Lauer was taken to the woodshed, apparently by his colleagues, but certainly by his colleagues in the broader mainstream media. I was shocked that they would blame Matt Lauer as if he's the one who set up a private email server in a closet, as if he's the one who said, I'm dead broke leaving the White House and turned around and is worth $250 million somehow, not taking a company public, not hitting the Powerball, just having a foundation set up and being the Secretary of State and giving speaking speeches. So what we do, you know, he watches TV, we all do, and we see the way we're treated routinely by other journalists and other cable stations. We read the lower third, we read the chyrons. I mean, you had CNN yesterday, somebody inserted the word racial based on his interview with Bill O'Reilly, where he never said the word. Let's just insert it there for ratings and good measure. So we certainly hope that he'll be treated fairly, and if the questions are fair and people and the voters are respected, Bret, with questions about issues that they tell pollsters, including Fox News' own pollsters, what they care about, what they expect from and deserve from these two candidates, and I think it'll be a great debate.
Yeah, hopefully a lot of policy. We'll see. The Washington Post has a story in which it says, quote, Donald Trump spent more than $250,000 from his charitable foundation to settle lawsuits that involve the billionaire's for-profit businesses, according to interviews and a review of legal documents. It goes on from tax records to detail exactly what those payments were. What is the reaction to this story and the specific allegation that this may have been illegal?
Right. So in the second paragraph of that story, Brett, you'll notice that the journalist does say may have, and later on says the IRS or the authorities may look into it. So there's a lot of speculation and conditional language there. I would just point out very quickly for the viewers that in the one case, Mr. Trump was being fined on a daily basis by either the county or city of Palm Beach, Florida, because he dared to want to raise the American flag at about 80 feet. Way past what the limit was. So he was penalized for that, and the city settled and said, gee, if you just write a check for $100,000 to a veterans charity, which got that money from the foundation, then the lawsuit will go away. So let's make very clear to the viewers, a veterans charity received $100,000 because of that, and I'm sure that they benefited from it. And I want to make clear, because this is in direct contrast to the Clinton Foundation, there's no one in the Trump family, including Mr. Trump, who takes a salary or benefits from the Trump Foundation. There's no permanent staff. There's no overhead. And that foundation for years, for decades, for many, many years, the only donor was Mr. Donald J. Trump. So others have contributed now, as they do. So I just want people to have the facts.
Yeah, we appreciate you addressing it. Thank you, as always, for coming on. Donald Trump's path to victory in battleground states grows brighter as Hillary Clinton loses some ground. We'll analyze the latest twists and turns in just a moment. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Brett Baer, in for Bill O'Reilly. And in the Factor follow-up segment tonight, the battle for 270 electoral votes. Donald Trump's recent surge in the polls paving a stronger potential path to victory against Hillary Clinton. According to the Fox News electoral scorecard just out today, a handful of states once leaning toward Clinton are now up for grabs. But does Trump have enough momentum to win them outright? Joining us now from New York to analyze, David Rothschild, an economist at Microsoft Research, and here in Washington, Kristen Soltis Anderson, a Republican pollster. Kristen, first to you. You look at this map. It has changed. It has shifted. Is it significant enough that the paths increase for Donald Trump to 270?
He certainly has more paths this week than he did 2 weeks ago. Certain states like North Carolina, which had previously shown consistent, sizable leads for Hillary Clinton, have now come back to where it's a pure toss-up. States like Ohio and Florida remain states that I think are very winnable for Donald Trump. So his path to 270 has improved, though it still is a hard uphill battle.
You know, David, talking to his supporters, they don't buy all the polls to begin with. But the clear thing is, if this race shifts 2 to 3 points in some of these states, you're talking about an entirely different electoral map.
Look, the 2 to 3 points is possible. This has happened, but that would be a very large shift and is not necessarily going to correlate with every state along the way. I have New Hampshire and Colorado is still pretty strong Democratic at +5 in polling average and about +4 in polling average for Clinton, respectively. And in order to reach 270, he is going to have to take all of those toss-up states plus either New Hampshire and something else, or Colorado, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania. These states are all still 4 or more points in Hillary Clinton's favor. And in order to sweep through all of those states, he's going to have to overcome the fact that there is a lot more GOTV, get out the vote, coming from the Hillary Clinton side. She has a big advantage on ad spending, and these are also going to affect the difference between the polling averages and ultimately what happens on Election Day.
But how much a difference does enthusiasm make compared to this year, money and get out the vote, as David mentions? I mean, you see the enthusiasm numbers exponentially in Trump's favor.
Well, an enthusiastic vote counts the same as an unenthusiastic vote at the ballot box. The question, though, is does it affect turnout? Do one candidate's supporters turn out in high higher numbers than another. Democrats have traditionally had a harder time turning their voters out than Republicans, who have benefited from older voters who have a history of voting. They're used to going to their polling place, which is why Democrats have invested so much in those get out the vote efforts that David talked about. So it is really going to be important for Democrats to try to boost the enthusiasm on their side to get those less frequent voters to turn out in the same numbers as Trump supporters.
And David, to that point, as I talked about with Juan, that is why we're going to see the president out on the trail for 2 days a week until the election. He's trying to get that coalition ginned up, but can he get there and transfer it to Hillary Clinton?
Well, I think that that's definitely going to make a big difference. But I should point out that a lot of the swings in the poll that we've seen recently have come from the changes from a registered voter model to a likely voter model, where Republicans are a little more likely to turn out, as Kristen was saying. We've also seen Trump consolidating his support among Republicans, and we've seen some nonpartisan non-response, which says that some Democrats just weren't answering the polls as much. That is kind of enthusiasm that ebbs and flows and does not necessarily translate into Election Day. In order for Trump to get all the way to 270, he needs to overcome a lot of obstacles when it comes to winning all of these toss-up states and getting some of these extra close Democratic states.
And 10 seconds, you guys looked at the same polls and came out with different results in one state.
Yes, that's right. So the New York Times Upshot blog, they gave 4 different pollsters the same data set from a survey that they conducted in Florida, and they said, come up with what result you think this poll should show. Each pollster picks its own weights, its own model for what they think the electorate will look like. I think David's numbers came back showing Trump up by 1 in Florida. My firm showed Clinton up by 1. Other firms showed it as much as Clinton by 4. The pollster does have a lot of latitude in making assumptions about who will and won't turn out.
There you go. Kristen, David, thank you. When we come back, the feds throw the book at bombing suspect Ahmad Rahami. Our Is It Legal duo breaks down the case against him. Upcoming. In the Is It Legal segment tonight, new developments in the case against bombing suspect Ahmad Rahami. Just a short time ago, federal prosecutors filed a string of charges against Rahami, including use of a weapon of mass destruction and bombing a public place. Meantime, Senator Lindsey Graham wants Rahami to be treated as an enemy combatant. Joining us now from New York, attorneys and Fox News analysts Kimberly Guilfoyle and Lise Wheel. Lise, we're just getting word over the wires that federal prosecutors in New Jersey just added 6 additional charges, which is normal. Your thoughts on this case?
Well, it brings it now to 10 federal charges after the 5 charges in the state charges in New Jersey. I've got the 13-page complaint here from New York, the Southern District of Manhattan. Those charges were using weapons of mass destruction, bombing a place of public use, destruction of property by means of fire and explosives, use of a destructive device. All of those charges together carry multiple up to life sentences. Now you can take on the other 6 charges in New Jersey. They're talking about multiple piling on of up to life charges. He's never going to see the light of day. Now, if I were the prosecutor on this case, I would be talking to him right away. I would use the protection, the public safety exception. There's been a lot of talk about enemy combatant. You don't need to use that. Right. You can use the public safety exception to say, look at you, I want to talk to you. There may be other bombs out there. There may be co-conspirators out there. I'm going to use this exception to say, I want to talk to you. I'm not going to Mirandize you. I'm not going to give you a lawyer. You tell me whether or not there's a co-conspirator out there. You tell me whether or not there's another bomb out there. Now, if you ever want to potentially even see the light of day. And I would use that right now.
Right.
This is not how this administration has operated.
No,
they have not
that's what I would
operated in
do.
that way, and they're not going to be listing them as an enemy combatant, him as an enemy combatant,
No,
because
they're not.
that's not how they do it.
They're not going to, avail themselves of the resources based on this being an act of multiple acts of terrorism. Yes, they could go the enemy combatant way, and then he wouldn't be afforded the same rights and privileges. Or you could use the public safety exception and say, yes, there are exigent circumstances, and we have an obligation to try to protect people to make sure there are no other, intentional devices, explosive devices that go off in other areas. And there's ample evidence to suggest that could be a possibility. And from the reporting of Catherine Herridge as well, in terms of perhaps as someone who did not act alone, the fact of the matter is that this someone who was radicalized, had some serious contacts and things in question here in terms of family members reporting about him. So there's a lot to be learned here. This is an information and intel-rich environment, and I don't know why they wasted so much time to begin with.
Right, and what's also
Lisa,
clear from our
the mother and the sister apparently left. I think it's the mother and the sister left before this incident over to the Middle East. We've heard about the father.
Right.
Are there any possible other charges facing this family?
Absolutely, for the family, whether they're trying to potentially be covering up for other family members. There's also what we've been hearing, just breaking news today, is a lot of premeditation that he'd been covering up. He'd done some dry runs potentially,
yes,
and looking at going over interstate for these dry runs. He'd been doing online shopping, shall we say? So this wasn't just kind of a spur of the moment.
A lot of premeditation.
Exactly. So that's all going on. They're going to be looking into this, and they're moving fast. But
not fast enough.
Not fast enough. And Kimberly and I agree. It stretches our imagination to think that this was just a lone wolf out there.
Yeah, last word, Kimberly.
Yeah, I just think that this is, the world is watching, and we need to show that we are aggressive and yet follow the law in the face of acts of terrorism committed in the United States of America. And today was a missed opportunity because this came too late.
Lise, Kimberly, thank you.
Got it.
Up next, U2 frontman Bono says Donald Trump is potentially the worst idea that's ever happened to America. We're taking a poll. What do you think? Should celebrities butt out from all election talk altogether? Stay tuned. In the Back of the Book segment tonight, celebrities and the presidential election. It's no secret that many of them are not on the Trump train, but Bono, the U2 frontman, may have outdone all his famous colleagues.
Look, America is like the best idea the world ever came up with. But Donald Trump is potentially the worst idea that ever happened to America. Potentially. Destroy it. America is an idea, and that idea is bound up in justice and equality for all. Equality and justice for all, He's hijacked the party. I think he's trying to hijack the idea of America, and I think it's bigger than all of us. I think this is really dangerous.
Joining us now from New York with reaction, radio talk show host Mike Gallagher, and with me here in Washington, David Goodfriend, former aide to President Bill Clinton. Mike, first to you. Listen, celebrities have freedom of speech. They can say whatever they want to say. What about this and what we saw at the Emmys just over the past couple of days?
Well, I mean, there's tremendous irony in a guy who wasn't born in the United States lecturing Americans on how to be good Americans. That always fascinates me. The other irony is that Donald Trump is the quintessential American story. We teach our kids in America that anybody can run for president. Donald Trump has had tremendous success in the private sector. The history books are going to be filled with this incredible year and this crazy year. But for Bono or any celebrity to put themselves out there in this way, I think all of us wish they would just perform their music. It's hard to criticize Bono. I don't like to, because he's done tremendous philanthropic work. But ultimately, it's kind of shocking to hear this deplorables theme, much like Mrs. Clinton did, in just denouncing somebody who has achieved, a pretty stunning American story.
David.
Well, I would disagree. I mean, when Ted Nugent, who's a supporter of Donald Trump, goes out publicly and says, I'm against Hillary Clinton, I think that's fair game. And he speaks to an audience, and he has his rights to, as my friend here says, exercise his freedom of speech. But what's interesting about what Mike just said is that you didn't play the rest of what Bono talked about. I mean, he said, I'm not attacking Trump supporters. He was really careful to say that. He said, I'm not attacking Trump supporters. I understand why a lot of people in the United States would feel that kind of frustration. So that was a really interesting distinction between, hold on, Mike, that was a really interesting distinction between what Bono said and what Hillary Clinton said, number one. And number two, I do think it's interesting that a non-American would say this. I don't think that's a bad thing, because what he was saying is we, at the rest of the world, we look to the United States for leadership in this idea of inclusiveness and freedom, and when you extinguish that, you really hurt your standing around the world.
Do you really think that Donald Trump is extinguishing freedom? If anything, these supporters are expressing their freedom by saying they choose this guy instead of the establishment Democratic side.
And if I may, David,
let me ask David real quick.
Sorry, Mike, I'll make this quick because I want you to jump in here too. But I think, I don't know, but I think what Bono was talking about were things like the comments today about how some immigrants maybe shouldn't have the right to counsel. You know, I'm a proud American, and I love the Constitution. I carry it with me. This is my, see my initials right there? And right here in the 6th Amendment, it says you get counsel. All right. In a trial. That's what he's talking about. If someone, if a candidate for president can say that, that's dangerous.
It's a nifty trick to try to say that it's a distinction that Bono is attacking Trump and not his supporters. A record number of Republicans elected Donald Trump. He is the duly elected Republican nominee. He is the Republican Party, whether Bono, a guy from Ireland, likes it or not. Ultimately, what Donald Trump has done has been extraordinary, and people on the left and Hillary supporters don't like it one bit. You can't change what has happened this year, and again, it's a good attempt to try to distinguish between Trump and his supporters. It's one and the same. It's the deplorables thing, and Americans resent it very, very much.
Mike, David, thank you very much. Okay. And before we go, please remember